All right, let's jump right in. When you hear the words military discipline, what comes to mind? Probably rigid, top-down control, right? But what if I told you that the most elite military units could actually teach modern business a thing or two about, well, about empowerment and autonomy? Today, we're going to unpack that surprising connection and see how military-grade discipline can actually unlock a new level of freedom in your workplace.
But first, let's start with a problem I think we've all seen. In the business world, discipline can feel all over the place. Some teams are just on it, sharp as a tack. Others are kind of chaotic. One manager is super strict, the next one is completely hands-off. So why is it so incredibly hard to get everyone pulling in the same direction?
And here is the single most important idea we're going to talk about today. This isn't the people problem. It's a process problem. It's not about finding more disciplined employees. It's about building a better system for the ones you already have.
Okay, so section 1. Let's really dig into what we're calling the discipline dilemma.
I mean, just think about it in your own company. The standards for the sales team are probably totally different from the standards in engineering, right? What one leader thinks is absolutely critical, another might just let slide. This kind of variability, it's pretty much the default state in most companies. And you know what? It creates so much friction and confusion.
So how do we fix that? Well, we can learn a ton from an organization that has absolutely mastered consistency, the military. Let's take a look at the anatomy of their approach to discipline. The whole thing really boils down to two key differences: purpose and authority. In the military, discipline is literally about survival. It is not optional. And that authority, it's backed by the full force of the law. But in business, well, discipline is a tool to get to profitability. And a manager's authority isn't a given. It has to be earned through credibility and persuasion. The entire foundation is just fundamentally different.
And when the stakes are that different, you can bet the consequences are worlds apart. But look at that last column, certainty. That's the key. In the military, consequences are written down, they're swift, and they're serious. In business, even firing someone can be this long, drawn-out process filled with risk. That massive difference in certainty, it changes human behavior. When consequences are a sure thing, compliance tends to follow.
Now, based on everything we've just said, you'd think the military is just a machine for creating blind obedience. But this is where the story gets really interesting. The modern military has a secret that totally flips that stereotype on its head. See, the end goal isn't to create robots. It's to build something they call disciplined initiative. And what that means is giving a soldier the ability to make a smart, decisive call on their own, on the fly, without having to wait for specific orders, as long as it supports the leader's overall goal. The battlefield is unpredictable. They are trained and empowered to adapt. Let that one sink in for a second. The whole point of all that intense, rigid discipline isn't to crush individual thinking. It's to build a framework that is so clear, so deeply understood, that people can act freely and effectively inside of it. It's a paradox, right? The discipline is what creates the freedom. And that idea brings us to the ultimate goal for any organization that wants to be truly high-performing. Let's call it disciplined autonomy. This is the sweet spot. It's not this false choice between rigid rules on one side and total chaos on the other. It's about combining crystal clear, non-negotiable standards with the trust and freedom for your team to use their own judgment to get the job done. So how in the world do you get there? Well, it's a very deliberate strategy. First, you have to define your most important processes with absolute rigor. No ambiguity. Then, you've got to shift your focus from tracking activity, just being busy, to holding people accountable for outcomes, the results. Then, and this is crucial, you have to treat discipline like a skill that you develop through coaching, not just a punishment. And when you do that, you can save that tight, rigid control for the truly make-or-break decisions and grant real autonomy everywhere else. So the big question is, how do you make this real? You can't just wish for it. You need a system to build this capability right into the DNA of your organization. You need to build a discipline engine. A proven framework looks a lot like this, and it's a cycle, not a straight line. You start by creating a positive, trusting environment. Then you actually document your core processes, your standard work. Then you communicate it, and communicate it again. Next, you measure how you're doing against that standard. And finally, you use that data to get better, which feeds right back into the whole system. And what's so cool is that you can see how this framework maps directly to those military principles. What the military calls doctrine, their official way of doing things, that's just standard work in business language. It's the one right way. And military orders, well, that's just a super effective form of process communication, making sure everyone is on the same page.
And the parallels just keep going. The military's famous after-action reviews, that's basically their version of measure and control, a brutally honest look at what was supposed to happen versus what really happened. And their lessons learned culture is the engine of continuous improvement, constantly making the standard better based on what they learn in the real world.
Okay, so let's bring all this home. Let's make it personal and put the focus right back on you and your team with a few simple, core questions.
Ask yourself this, honestly. Could everyone on your team answer these 3 questions with the exact same answer? 1. What exactly is the job? 2. How are we supposed to do it? And 3. How do we know we're doing it right? If the answers are fuzzy or if they're different from person to person, you don't have a people problem. You have a process problem. You simply can't hold someone accountable to a standard that you haven't made perfectly clear.
And that right there is the ultimate lesson. We tend to think of discipline as this external thing we force on people, as pressure. But what elite organizations teach us is that true sustainable discipline isn't about pressure at all. It's about clarity. It's about creating a system so clear that everyone knows exactly what to do, how to do it, and why it's important. And it's in that clarity that people find the real freedom to do their best work.